right, good evening, everybody. We are joined, as always, by Drew and Lee for our weekly Flock Talk, the podcast. Today, we were going to talk about a bunch of different things. We're still going to talk about them. We're going to start, obviously, with Michigan. I'm going to ask for Drew, kind of your impressions about the Michigan game, your final thoughts before we head into the next week.
Good, yeah. I really liked the Michigan game. They came out, they imposed their will. They did a really good job running the ball. Like I said, they did a good job getting the ball to Jordan James. They had about between close to 25 carries, 100 yards, and they just did a good job up front on both sides of the ball. Looking at the stats for the game, there were no sacks for either defense. Michigan was able to get a little bit of pressure, kind of get Dylan Gabriel out of the pocket, a little bit uncomfortable. But he did a good job, especially after losing Tez early in the game. A lot of other guys stepped up, did some very good things, but it was just a dominant performance by the defense. We kind of gave them a score at the beginning by fumbling that punt, which gave them great field position to go ahead and punch one in that they didn't deserve. But outside of that, it was a good matchup. The thing I'm worried about the Ducks with, and the thing that causes me a little bit of concern it's just how they come out for the second half. It might just be something that's happening over the last couple weeks, maybe no big deal. But you would like to see in games like this, you would like to see them go down, score the touchdown or two at the beginning of the half, put the game away so other guys can get in a little bit quicker. But for this game, they had a field goal at the end of third, and they had that touchdown at the very end to kind of put the game away. So between this game and then also the last game, they just took too long in the second half for me to come out and kind of just put one in the end zone and move the game along.
I agree with that. And I think one of the things we still forget, and I think who was it that said this week? I can't remember if it was, I think it was Jabbar. Basically, the other team has players in scholarship as well, and they want to do things as well. I think against Michigan, it's not as surprising. They made some pretty good defensive adjustments to limit some of the explosions that were happening, limit some of the quick outs that were happening. And I thought they made some decent defensive adjustments. I would have liked to see more offensive adjustments to the adjustments. And that's what I think has been missing. You expect a defense that comes out and has been blown out in the first half of a game against Oregon. You expect that defense to come back with some adjustments to change some of the things they're doing to be more successful. But you also then expect adjustments to those adjustments where the offense gets rolling a little bit quicker. And I was going to talk about it a little bit when we talk about the Maryland game. I think the reason I want to see it this week with third quarter effectiveness isn't just because I think the game will be close, because I don't think the game will be close in the third quarter this week. I think what I need to see is guys get in a little bit earlier in the game to get more reps. Kavika Rogers came in last week. He hadn't really had enough reps, I don't think, to be ready to face a Mason Graham coming off the bench cold when Marcus Harper went down. And I'd like to see some more guys get some more experience in that fourth quarter instead of the late drive. I'd like to see them get in and play some of the offense or some of the defense and get things going like they would if it were a real situation for the future, so they're prepared better. I think that's the biggest thing for me is not that the games were in jeopardy. It's that you didn't get chances for your young guys to get in as early as you would like them to do to get that experience. And that was my big takeaway. Obviously, I was impressed with the defense for the most part. They did a pretty good job of containing. Really, really, really impressed with, and I said three reallys. I know that's not grammatically correct. I don't care. With Mateo Uyangalele with his coverage on the trick play with Michigan, with his ability to stay with his man and not allow that play to be a touchdown, because that is something that not elite defenses would struggle with. Elite defenses don't, because they have good discipline, and he showed such great discipline there. And I think I was going to get into it. We'll talk about it. I want to talk about the Ohio State Penn State game, and there's a reason for that, because I think Oregon is going to face Ohio State again. I do think Ohio State's better than Indiana. I do think they're going to get to the Big Ten championship game, and they're going to face them again. But what I saw Penn State do, they didn't do well enough to win because they went away from what was working, and that was attacking Donovan Jackson. They did it with, I believe, Abdul Carter three times in a row, and they got three stops in a row, and then they went away from it. And I understand why. They probably don't have a second edge rusher that can be as effective, and they couldn't just keep doing the same thing over and over again. Oregon doesn't have that problem. So Donovan Jackson, who was a converted guard and is really good as a guard, right? He's a starter. He's a good offensive lineman. Is he a left tackle at this level? Maybe by the time he plays Oregon, he'll have gotten his footwork down and he'll be better at protecting the blind side. But Oregon doesn't have to rush one guy on the side. They can use Mateo or Jordan, no matter which side, and they can just keep going, and they can switch them back and forth if they need to because you have two good edge rushers. There's some things they can do, and then you have Tatum Tuioti coming in as an outside linebacker as well. Uh, I think there's some plays to be made there, and I think that is important for. As I was watching that, that was what stood out to me is that Donovan Jackson struggled a lot with his protections because he's not a tackle, he's a guard, and he's the best person they have left available after the two guys went down with injury. And I also watched with the. I don't know why coaches keep doing this. And Drew, you can tell me if I'm interpreting this wrong. When you're already in a compressed vertical section of the field, the goal to go situations, why on earth do you then run to the compressed side of the field horizontally? There's just nothing there unless you find a way to spread that team out or misdirect them off of that side. But when you flood the side with everybody, the defense floods with you, and there's nothing there. And Penn State did it. Washington did it. Oregon has done it. I don't understand why teams are doing this. Is there something I'm missing?
I wouldn't say there's something you're missing. I just know sometimes coaches get into their head like, hey, when we do this, we're gonna get this look, and if we get this blocked like this, well, that's what they say every play. But if we get this guy blocked right here, there's no one else out there for us to do whatever. And so sometimes it really goes like that. And maybe the defense shows you something that you didn't do all year, or maybe that one guy that you were sure that you were gonna block or you needed to block for sure went off and made the play. But I'm also not a fan of that as well. When a team either, rolls out one way and they pretty much cut off they can't throw to pretty much half of the field. And so they really kind of downgrade their chances on their options that they have out in the field.
Yeah, and at the college level, it's even less than half of the field because the where the hash marks are. And like I said, you're already vertically compressed because you're in the goal to go situation, and now you're horizontally compressed because of the side of the field you're going to. That's just such a tight space. I don't know. Analytics must be telling them something that I don't see, but I thought, four plays, and the worst part is when they ran that play. Three straight plays right up the middle, right up the gut, and then you try to run that compressed end zone play. Do that on second down. Do it on third down. Break it up a little bit so that it's not what they expect. Out of a play action, something that you can make them think, "Ooh, it's a play action." Right? Oh, whoa, what did they do? You might have been able to get away with that on third down. I don't think it was effective on fourth down. But yeah, there's just things I thought I saw in that. Lee, what did you see? Did you get a chance to watch the game this weekend?
Not this weekend.
It was
I
an
had
early one for you. I thought maybe you'd be able to get there.
I was at the South Carolina tailgate trying to get to the television, but we had Florida Georgia was on across the tailgate. But I saw Oregon maintaining a good lead, saw a few good highlights. Just want to establish a little bit more of a presence because there's going to be tougher games coming up. Kind of reflecting on what y'all said.
Yeah, by the way, did you do any of the tailgates at the cabooses, or did you have to just do regular tailgates?
Right. Across from the Cabooses Gamecock Park where they walk, where Coach Beamer and the team walk into the stadium. Huge crowd. Great experience. South Carolina looking great on the field and the recruiting trail and the Ducks as well.
Drew, if you didn't know, that's their kind of thing. They have these cabooses that you basically buy and decorate yourself as tailgate spots. I know this because when I was living in South Carolina, I went down to a game once and I'd heard about this and I thought I'm going to go just check it out and see what it is. And I walk up to one of them and I kind of stuck my head in and say, "Hey, I'm from Oregon. I'd really like to kind of just look around real quick and just check this out and talk about it with the people on our message board." And the dude invited me in, and I tailgated with him the rest of the day until I went into the game and kind of just watched. It was South Carolina Vandy, so it wasn't a big game. It was just something to do on a Saturday in October when I was living there, because what else am I going to do on a Saturday in October if I'm in South Carolina? So it was fun. The caboose thing was really cool. They treated me really great, and lots of beer and lots of good food when I was there. So that was fun. I had a good time at that game.
Big
Let's turn.
tradition.
It is. Let's turn. Let's turn to talk a little bit about Maryland and what kind of Drew. What do you think you expect to see for this game?
I expect to see, like you said, I expect to see a dominant performance. As I looked, even just looking at the rest of Oregon's schedule, I'm over here like I'm not the person to put a crown on their head and say, "Oh, we're good for the rest of the year." But there doesn't seem to be a matchup for us the remainder of the year. Like I talked about, maybe the weather when we go to Wisconsin. We don't know what it'll be like. Maybe it'll be cold. Maybe it'll be snowing. But Maryland's not a very good team. They throw the ball a lot, and that's one thing I do like to see. They have a receiver that almost has 1,000 yards right now. He has 907, if I'm correct, 7 touchdowns. And so, anytime there's going to be good matchups on the field with cornerbacks and wide receivers, I really like to see that, especially because Muhammad doesn't get tested much. And so, just playing a team like that, he'll have a chance to get some interceptions, to get some film for the NFL scouts. But I think Oregon will roll like they usually do.
And by the way, they have two good receivers. They have Ty Felton is the one that leads the team with receptions and yards, and they also have Caden Prather. Between the two, I think 113 receptions, over 1,300 yards. It's like 56% of their passing yards are to those two receivers. So it's actually going to be interesting to watch the secondary because they're going to have to not just be able to let Jabbar Muhammad take one guy. I think they're going to have Nico Reed step up as well. I think the thing that bodes well for Oregon is that over the last few games, they've given up 11 of their 13 sacks in conference play. So with that's they've played 5 conference games, and so 11 sacks in 5 conference games is not good. And I think Oregon is going to be the best defensive front they will have faced. They're not a good defense. That's the bigger thing is they can't stop anybody. They're
Yeah.
I think they go up 37 points to Northwestern. They're just not very good on defense, and I don't see them having the capacity to stop Oregon. And once they become one dimensional, I don't care how good Billy Edwards is at throwing the ball. When you're one dimensional and they know what's coming, it's not going to be a good day for you. It's going to be a long day because you're going to get a lot of pressure. You're going to get hit. You're going to get sacked a couple of times. It's going to be unpleasant, especially as Oregon kind of I think starts to build the lead. I do want to see what they do with Tez out. And I think, I said this week that I expect Sadiq to be somebody that they feature a little bit more, not because he exactly fits Tez's mold, because he's a matchup nightmare. How do you guard him? And that also then kind of takes the pressure off of Justice Lowe coming in and try to fill Tez's spot because nobody's going to fill Tez's spot right now. You're going to have to do some different things. You'll see, I think, everybody get a little bit more targets. But the comfort zone of those checkdown guys, I think that's where Dylan's gonna look at is Terrence Ferguson, Kenyon Sadiq. Those are good checkdown guys, and he'll take his shots downfield to Evan Stewart and Trayshawn Holden, and he'll try to get some shots just as low. I think it's going to be interesting to watch that, and I also want to see how Kavika does this week against a defensive line that one isn't as good, but two now that he has a full week to prepare as the starter. I know he said this week in interviews that he always prepares as if he's going to start, and that's a good thing to say. I don't know how true it is. You know you're not the starter. You know you need to be ready to go in at any point, but I think it's different when you are getting every first team rep all week long than when you're getting mostly second team reps and a few first team reps because things change. Communication changes, snap cadence count changes when you're working with Novosad versus Gabriel. Little things like that, I think, play into your readiness. And I think we're going to see a little bit better version of Kavika Rogers this week. It's also good to see Dave Yuli's back, and we'll see if he gets any playing time. I know he was on the field last week. He didn't get any snaps, but I think that's a good sign for depth, especially since I'm not sure when Matt Bedford's coming back. I think Harper, I'm guessing that it's probably in the conference championship game along with Tez. You might see them come back for some time at Washington. I'm not sure how serious Tez's injury is. I don't expect Marcus Harper to play this week or next. And then you got the bye week and then Washington. So I think there's also probably no reason to play either one of those guys until you get to the conference championship game.
I agree.
Lee, what you got on your thoughts for this week? Have you had a chance to kind of look at Marin a little bit? They're on your side of the country, so I'm thinking you might have at least seen something from them.
Probably another strong Ducks performance. Maryland good on offense, not good on defense. But how are they going to continue momentum with a strong Oregon defense? I think 55-14 type game.
Ooh.
Wow, higher than I went 42-17. I went straight Vegas. Vegas has as a 25-point spread, and they have it as a, I think, 59 over under, 59 and a half. So I go straight Vegas on this one just so that I can be comfortable with my thoughts. It's so hard to predict 50 plus points against any conference opponent unless I mean they didn't score 50 against Purdue, so it's really difficult for me to project that yet. I think they're probably going to jump out to a pretty good halftime lead and then coast like normal. I think you might see that late score. It could have been a 42-10 late, and I think you see Maryland keep pushing, trying to get some points late to get to that 42-17. I don't think they can't run the ball at all, and so I think they average like 119 a game, but that's not a good run attack as in this conference. And I think you're going to see Maryland be one-dimensional from a very early part of the game, and that is what they do, but they haven't done it against the likes of Oregon yet. So I think that's going to be a real challenge for them. Now, I did want to talk some recruiting. I'm going to kind of put this up here just because I can. The Ducks were supposed to have a big visitor this weekend, so we'll show them here. Lincoln Cure was supposed to be in town this weekend. He had his flight scheduled. He was going to be driving to the airport in Denver tomorrow, and weather has now canceled that. So he is not going to be in town this weekend. The interstate is closed, so he can't even drive to the airport. He lives in a place called Goodland, Kansas. That is about 20 miles east of the Colorado border. So his flight plan is out of Denver. I was originally, and I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway and say, so if people don't know who Lincoln Cure is, and we'll go a little bit deeper into what's happened here. Oregon had a tight end commit from the number 3 tight end in the nation, Desan Brame. He committed on June 29th. The Ducks were also at the same time recruiting Lincoln Cure. They really like him. He's the number 2 rated tight end in the country. He's the number 47 overall player in the nation. 4-star guy, 5.9 rating. Really, really elite guy. And he's the kind of tight end, 6'6", 220, 230. He's going to be a guy like a Kenyon Sadiq that's a Swiss Army knife. He can do things in a lot of ways. He's going to be able to beat you in a lot of ways. And I think what then happened is Desan Brame, about 3 weeks later, it became clear he was going to decommit from Oregon. And Lincoln Cure had already committed to Kansas State on July 1st. But the Ducks never stopped recruiting him. And that's something that people need to know. It's not that they suddenly said, oh, gosh, we need another tight end. They didn't stop recruiting him even after Desan Brame had committed, because we know how these things go. Recruiting changes all the time. And so over the last few months, they've continued to talk to him, wanted to get him back out of here for another visit. And this was supposed to be it. This was going to be the visit. I don't think that's a guarantee of a flip. Even if he visits this weekend, it doesn't mean he's going to flip. It just means that what he's seeing from Oregon, both from the coaching contacts and from what they're doing on the field with tight ends, is something that appeals to him. So what I'm going to do actually is I want to show, we're going to look at a little bit at, and Drew, you can look at this. I don't know if you've seen any of his highlights, but we're going to look at his highlights, and I'm going to pull up the video here for him. I'm going to present for it and do that. I think when you see what he can do, you'll understand, I think, a lot of what this hype about is, and all the people who haven't had a chance to see it, this is it. And I'm going to go ahead and go straight to the highlights, so you guys can just kind of look at some of this stuff. We're not going to do all of them, but when you watch what he's flexed as a wide receiver, and he's making wide receiver type route, and yet he's way too big for guys at the edge, right? That's a 6'6", 220 guy going up against cornerbacks. And granted, this is not the highest level of football in Kansas, but it's still something that he is supremely talented. And when you watch him, now he's lined up kind of in the slot position there. And you can just see kind of up the 50-50 ball. He's going to beat a lot of those guys. He's bigger, stronger, faster. He's just going to beat a lot of those guys. And this is a kid that Oregon really likes, and they're not going to stop recruiting him just because he can't make it out this weekend. I think they're going to try to get him out either for the bye week or for the Washington game. They're still going to try to get him out. And you can see here, he just beat a defensive back in a straight go route. He just beat him. this is a supremely talented guy that I think Oregon would love to add because he's kind of like a Kenyon Sadiq type player, and he can block. He can do everything you want a tight end to do. And I think that is something that Oregon really likes. Does this mean that Oregon is not going to pursue Kenyon Sadiq? I'm sorry, is not going to pursue Vanderploeg still, even if they were able to get him? No, they're going to continue recruiting Vanderploeg, and I say that because the Ducks want two tight ends in this class. They do. It's if you look at the roster, Patrick Herbert and Terrence Ferguson are both done after this year, and so the Ducks then have Kenyon Sadiq, Roger Saliapaga, and AJ Puviano. That's it. That's who they have left. And of those three, only one has caught a pass in a college football game. That is going to be something where they're going to need to build some depth here. It's been kind of a struggle over the last couple of years with some people leaving, changes, things like that. So they're going to try to take two. So they would love to add Cure and Vanderploeg. So this is not going to change their approach to tight end recruiting. If they do get him, they're going to continue recruiting Vanderploeg. If they don't get him, they're going to continue recruiting Vanderploeg, and they may look at somebody else. Drew, you watched a little bit of it there. What did you think? Did you see kind of some of the same things?
Yeah, anytime you talked about the level of play, if you're a baller and things we look at on film as coaches when I was in the coaching world, you look at the person, you look at if they're separating away from people, you look at if they're doing things like going up and getting the ball, just fast twitch muscles, how many people they're making miss. So like when I watch the film and you say it's a lower level, I'm like, okay, that's fine. But ballers go to all types of schools. They're in rural areas, different cities, and things like that. So it's about finding these diamonds in the rough and being like, hey, it speaks to a coaching staff to be able to find these people and to recruit them and to say, hey, this is a guy we really like because he pops on film and we really think he belongs here and will do some great things in this offense. So everything you said about that film, I'm gonna go watch him after this too. But they look spot on just as far as a big physical guy who like you said, he's lined up out there wide receiver. So I know the hybrid tight end is becoming even more of a thing with guys that can move and are agile and athletic. And so I think that's nothing but good things ahead.
So, all right, Lee, you probably have a lot of knowledge on some of the recruits out there. Have you watched a lot of Lincoln, or have you been focused more on the 2026 guys?
Haven't watched Lincoln yet. Watched a lot of Derek Coleman, Brusa, and broke down Toby Histraub and Zayden Crimpin today.
Lee, you froze on us. Um, you guys, by the way, are seeing my dog in the background, so she's decided to come up and listen to see what's going on with me. Normally, she's asleep this time of night. Um, one thing that broke today, it's news about recruiting, actually sort of recruiting, sort of team news. I think you're going to see other conferences do this. I don't know if you saw it, Drew. The SEC came out today, and Lee, this will be important for recruiting too. The SEC came out today and said that with the new 105 men's total roster limit, they're still going to have an 85 scholarship limit, and the other 20 are supposed to be walk-ons. Now, we know in this day and age that you cannot deny a walk-on player NIL opportunity. So we know that the elite schools are still going to be paying their walk-ons NIL funding, getting them a bunch of academic scholarships, and they're not really going to be paying their own way, but they can't be on a financial aid agreement. It'll have to just be NIL and or scholarships from academic side. I think that's the way to go. It's the way to try to minimize some schools buying 105 players while other schools can barely afford the 85. I like the concept of also having the concept of walk-ons, guys that, hey, they're the Bryce Betchers of the world or other guys like that that weren't part of the team as a scholarship player but come in and prove themselves in practice and earn their way into a scholarship. I like that. I'm glad the SEC did it. I really, really hope that the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the ACC follow suit because I think that's the way to make sure that everybody within those conferences can at least try to stay competitive and on the same playing field with the player count. Because if you have some schools doling out 105 scholarships and some doing 85, you know what's going to happen. It's going to be like the old days when teams stockpiled talent, and That's what happened before we had scholarship limits, and I think it's a good thing that we went away from that, and I think it's a good thing that the SEC is doing. I don't know if you saw that, Drew. That was the news today, so that was just one of those things I wanted to get your thoughts on as well.
No problem. I didn't hear about that actually, but I also it's funny, that just like you said, schools and coaches will try to find a way around it. They will find some loophole that still allows them to pay whatever player or pull from this fund or whatever it might be. But it's good that they're actually thinking about that kind of stuff. They're trying to keep somewhat the parity of it, but we also know just with NIL in general, there's been schools competing that usually wouldn't be able to based on NIL and based on the talent that they can cultivate and recruit. So I think it's a good thing. There's always going to be coaches that try to figure out that loophole and try to play by the rules by exactly playing by the rules. But I think it's a good thing for football.
It is. And Lee, I think that brings me to Evan Stewart in your neck of the woods. There was some reports about what they're negotiating for his second year, because obviously that guy he could probably be playing in the NFL right now and getting minutes. He's that good.
Oh, Dylan.
Yeah, and Dylan is really that good. And there's talk about, and what I like about what I heard about the way they're negotiating with him today is they didn't pay him $10 million up front. And they didn't say, we're going to give you X amount per year. They basically said a 1 year at a time, because we don't know how you're going to do the first year. And we don't want to, and I like that. And I think it's working for them, because now they're going to be able to kind of go back to the table with him and say, wow, this is what you're going to earn. And does that mean he's going to also negotiate with other schools? He's probably going to find out, because these guys have agents. He's going to find out what he's worth, and he's going to find out if South Carolina is offering close to what he's worth, and then make a call, because that guy is an NFL player in college, and he's got 2 more years left. So it's a really good player, and I'm glad there are schools like South Carolina able to do that, because again, that's Drew, to your point, a school that may not have competed in the past for all these elite players, and suddenly they are. Nicholas Harbour, Stu Evan, these different things that they're able to do with NIL that they couldn't have done before, when Alabama and Georgia were basically, and Ohio State were controlling all the elite recruits, and everybody else was trying to pick up whatever they could and out scheme. And I like where it's going, and that's an example. Have you had a chance to hear anything on that end of it, Lee?
About NIL negotiations?
Yeah.
No.
That's okay. It's
For South Carolina, really just focusing on high school recruiting, and just kind of like what we do here for the Oregon side. But
perfect.
Yeah.
One player that is going to make it to town this weekend is the quarterback, and I think that's Jaden Curtis. So I think that is something that is a big visit. Oregon already has a quarterback for the 2026 class in Jonas Williams, who they really like, a dual threat quarterback in the Midwest area. And I think this doesn't change that. This is the reality of college football at the elite level. You have to have two good quarterbacks that you recruit. And the reason for that is simple. What happens if one doesn't progress like you want him to? You don't want to have to go to the portal every year to find your quarterback. You don't want to recruit one quarterback for the class and he doesn't make the progress you expect him to make, so that by the time he's supposed to be the starter, you don't have anybody to the starter and have to go back to the portal. So getting two quarterbacks in a class, I think, is going to become the norm. Are you going to be able to both get 2 5-stars? Probably not. But I think you're looking at getting him and getting Jonas Williams. Those are 2 elite quarterbacks, and the chances you're going to miss on both are less. And I like that. I know he's in Tennessee. I don't know if you have had a chance to do some more digging on him, Lee.
Yeah, unfortunately, haven't heard back from all these players, but just hoping to hear back from everyone. But I've been looking into all the guys, and I would say, Oregon probably a favorite for Jared Curtis, but going to have a lot of competition from those SEC schools. But got to love what Oregon's doing with him.
Yeah, and I think these guys, a lot of times the offensive coordinator is the big one for them, but in this case, that's really true with Will Stein. I think Will Stein has really proven himself this year to be a creative play caller. I don't think anybody here would disagree. He's been way more creative this year than he was last year. I thought last year he was lacking at times in his creativity. He was kind of by the book, and I think the growth that I've seen in him as a coordinator year over year has been really impressive, and that's going to start attracting even better talent than they already have. When you see that what he's been able to do with Dylan Gabriel now, it's not just Bo Nix. And yes, Dylan Gabriel's also a sixth-year quarterback, but they can't say, well, that was just because it was Bo Nix. He's done it now with two quarterbacks, and it's the play calling, not just the execution of the plays. So I really like that. Another guy in town this weekend, Darian Ball. He's already an Oregon commit. He is from Texas, from a school that people might know of, they've heard of, from Texarkana. Some running back from Oregon went there a long time ago. I don't know who that was. LaMichael James already knows him and likes him, and I think he's a really, really good running back, and I'm really excited about seeing what he can do. He's going to be back on campus. He's done some other visits, even though he's already committed. But I think it's good that Oregon's getting him back on campus during this season, trying to make sure that they keep that strong relationship. Show him everything Oregon has to offer. Show him the game day experience again. Let him see what it's like to be there on a night game. Because yeah, it's November. It's going to get dark early. It's going to get the lights are going to be on earlier than normal, and fans are going to be fans, and students are going to be students, and it's going to be pretty crazy on a Saturday night. It starts at 4. By the time you get to the second half, it's dark, and that creates this whole different environment that is fun to play in. And it's supposed to be decent weather this weekend. It's supposed to be mid-50s and no rain in Eugene. I will say this: it was 65 and sunny here today in Portland, so I don't complain about a November day that's 65 and sunny. So that's kind of my thoughts on recruiting for the week. I don't have a ton of there's not a ton of visits this week. It's one of those slower weeks because one, good teams players are in the playoffs, and so they're not flying out on a Friday night. They'd have to fly out on a Saturday, and that kind of compresses their time zone. And two, it's just not one of those games that is going to attract as much attention from recruits. I think you're going to see that with Washington. And I know that on the 23rd, it's a bye week for Oregon, but Jakeem Stewart is going to be in town, as well as Brandon Arrington. And that is a true business trip. Not in the bad way. That's just it's not a game. He's coming in to really go over the plan. It's not just, hey, let's see the facilities, let's see the game atmosphere like he did for Ohio State. He's coming to see the plan. What is the plan from Oregon, and what are they going to do for him on off the field? Those types of things, and it's the nitty gritty part of it. And I think same with Brandon Arrington. Arrington's a long shot, I think, in this case, just because of other ties. But I think I see the 23rd being an important weekend for those kind of players that really want to come in and have a discussion about something more in depth and not get lost in the shuffle during a recruiting weekend. But I do expect the 30th to be another big recruiting weekend just because it's a rivalry game. You want your recruits in town for a rivalry game because everything that you saw against Ohio State is just as amped up for a rivalry game. And as much as people may have also considered Oregon State a rivalry, you know it, I know it. The Oregon-Washington rivalry is real. There's a reason that Kenny Wheaton is still celebrated everywhere because he helped beat Washington and turn the program around against a team that was arrogant towards Oregon, a team that once denied Oregon a spot in the Rose Bowl just because they could by voting for Cal. There's some animosity there. That there's a reason that the animosity exists. It's not just because they're in a different state, but there's a reason and there's a lot behind it. And I think getting recruits out for a game like that is really cool and big, and it's going to be fun. I think this weekend is going to be a chance for Oregon to say to the rest of the world, because I saw it again. I saw it again today. Somebody saying, can Oregon stay focused for a game against a team where they're 3 touchdown favorites? You mean like they did when they went to Purdue and shut out Purdue? You mean like they did when they dominated Illinois? The narrative out there, people are still waiting for Oregon to mess up. I don't see it. I don't see Dan Lanning letting this team lose focus. Drew, did you get a chance to watch the us versus them this week?
I didn't.
So if you didn't, and the fans have already, some of them have already seen it, they used the Gladiator movie as the theme for the week, talking about. So when you heard, I think probably people heard the quote, "Warriors control the arena, not the spectators." That's what Dan Lanning said to a reporter during the game and after the game. And it came out that they had watched Gladiator, and the thumbs down was in part a reference to that movie. Because of it's thumbs down. It's we've decided that no mercy. They could have said Cobra Kai stuff as well. No mercy, no mercy. What didn't get talked about much here yet, and we'll talk about it. This is probably the last thing I'll discuss today, and I'll get you guys' thoughts on this. Near the end of the game, Dan Lanning called a timeout. The reason he did it, and it came out on the Ducks versus them episode, the reason he called that timeout near the end of the game was to tell the players something he'd already told them during the week. He said, I'm going to call a timeout, and you guys, I want you to look up at the stands and watch their fans leaving. I want you to celebrate that feeling of watching you empty the arena for them. You control the arena, not them. And so he did. He called a timeout, and he told them to look around, and they did. And you see them looking around and understanding that they controlled that arena that day, not the 110,000 people that were there. Whether I liked it or not is not relevant. It was a really good moment, and it's the proof to me that Dan Lanning isn't going to let this team lose focus just because it's Maryland. And I'll let you guys kind of share your thoughts, parting thoughts on that.
I will say that when you have a coach is a motivator. They do X's and O's and everything like that. But a good coach keeps you motivated week in and week out, practice from day to day up to the game. And it's very hard when you're the number one ranked team in the nation, or when you're ranked really high, you have a bullseye on your back the whole time. So you're always trying to find that edge or that motivation to tell your players to keep them on their toes. And I think Dan Lanning does a good job of that. From just me being on the outside looking in, like you said, from week to week, there's a theme. There's always something he's talking about. But he seems to me like a player's coach, and players love to play for a coach like that, who's fun, energetic, and also knows their stuff. So shout out to Dan Lanning for doing a great job keeping those guys motivated. And honestly, this is one of the best Oregon teams I've seen in my young natural life.
I agree with that. And I'm not as young, so I was there for the 94. In fact, I graduated from Oregon in 94, so I was there for all that. Lee, what do you think? You
Yeah,
like that
so
motivation technique?
I mean, I've been hearing all sorts of things about Lanning. Yeah, I find that story quite quite crazy itself, and this is just another example of Lanning and the message and the culture that he's building at Oregon, and that's just one small example. There's many more things that he does with this team and these players, and the message that he sends to these recruits, and um, he's culture is one thing, but also instilling that defense, that physical defense, is I think the one thing the Ducks were missing in the past, and that's what they've got now with Lanning.
I guess the last thing I'll end on, and I don't know if you noticed the play, Drew, the punt, where they had the offsides, or they actually it's illegal formation penalty on the defense. That was specifically designed because they had a feeling that if you put the team out there in that lineup, they would line up wrong, because a lot of players don't know that it doesn't matter if you have only the long snapper in the center of the field and everybody else out wide. You still can't line up head over head with the long snapper. It's not it's not about whether you hit him or not. It's about where you lined up. It's no different than an offensive lineman being in the backfield. That's an illegal formation, irrespective of whether he actually goes out for a pass or does anything else with it. The formation itself is the penalty. The, Dan Lanning knew and called that particular punt on that particular play because that play was important. That 5 yards was the difference between giving the ball back to Michigan in good field position and getting a first down and going down and getting a field goal, which then extended the lead to 31-17, which changed the complexion of the way the rest of the game played out. That was a brilliant coaching call. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't, oh, we got lucky that they lined up wrong. That was, they will line up wrong if we put this formation out there. We're going to do this now because this is the time that it matters. Are other teams going to figure that out? Of course they are. And our defense is going to be better tuned to that knowledge of the rule book? Yes. But in the moment, again, it's another rule. And this one, you can't even call it cheating. You lined up, they lined up wrong. That's their fault. It's their fault if they don't know the rules better. And I thought any of the compromise or any of the questioning I had of Dan Lanning last year was always over decision making, play calling. This shows just how well he knows the rules of this game and how to win this game. He may make some fourth down decisions that don't work, but he knows what he's doing. Anybody that questions his ability to call plays on a game day, we're wrong. He knows what he's doing. And this, to me, this play was more brilliant than the Ohio State play because you can't question whether this was cheating. It was, we lined up, they did it wrong. I knew they would do it wrong. That's their fault for not knowing the rules. That is a brilliant game right there. And I can't be more impressed with a single punt formation in the history of the world, except maybe the Michael Clay return against Oregon State. I might call that a better punt game, but that was just because of the circumstances where it happened. But it was just a brilliant, brilliant play call, and I was really impressed with that. And that's kind of my closing thoughts for the week is the change that I've seen in Dan Lanning this year and his ability on games is impressive.
And to piggyback off that, when you talk about coaching, like, there's X's and O's, but knowing the rule book and seeing how people are going to line up to a certain things, like those are next level things that, especially at the college level, it's hard to do because you don't have your players for that long for practice. Like there's a couple things, but just saying that like you said, it was real big for that drive because your defense was off the field, your offense is about to come on, they're about to have a chance to come down and score to tighten the game, and figure out to do that at that time to give you guys a whole nother drive to take a lot more time off the clock. That's what football really is. When you start getting down to the minutia of like that type of stuff, that's when you have a really good coach, a guy that's going to turn over every stone and going to put something out there. They'll probably never run that formation again or anything like that for the rest of this year, but they're already thinking about the next thing that they're going to do that you're not ready for. So while this lets other teams across the nation know, hey, when they line up in this formation, we can't do this, they're already thinking about the two or three other things. So it's pretty much chess and not checkers.
Absolutely. All right. I think that's it for football stuff this week. It's a pretty slow recruiting week. We will let you guys go, and we will do this again next week.
Sounds good. Good to see you, fellas.
Sounds good, Scott. Thank y'all.
All right. Talk to you guys soon.
All right. Bye.